I can remember long ago, as I was being introduced to the Jewish community and taught about the different parts of it, of being taken to a back place in Jerusalem. I don't remember when and I don't remember where. I had to be a young man. The place was dark. I came in and noticed a mezuzah on the door. And I went in and looked at these bare quarters that were being pioneered by the chalutzim, the pioneers of stalwarts of the early days of Israel. I looked at the back wall and I saw a piece of plaster, unpainted. And I saw a banner, not certainly as big, nor as fancy, nor even as well woven as the banner of the chaplaincy that I love and care for so much. It was a barren space because the house was to be incomplete, because the dwelling on this earth was incomplete while redemption was yet to come, according to the philosophies of these new stalwart pioneers in Israel. It was a reminder to all that there was more to be done. And the words of the Pirkei Avot, Lo alecha ligmor, came upon me. There's much to be done, but it is not incumbent upon each one of us to complete that work. But neither are we free to desist from it altogether. That is the challenge that comes to us. That is the model that is put before us. Last evening I did something I have never done before in this chapel. I sat behind Dr. Stern. I always talk to you. I never yell after you. But Hank sits in a particular place, and the seat in front of him is reflective of that philosophy of being incomplete, of having more to do and not having the time to do it. There is a seat there that is waiting for completion. It is below the flying of the POW MIA flag. Those of us who have been in the service and have that credential know the meaning of that black flag almost immediately, and it becomes visceral. It means that there's yet work to be done. Lo alecha ligmor, it's not incumbent upon us to finish that work, but neither are we free to desist from it altogether. And it sits here in every chapel service, at every denomination, to remind us that there is a job yet still to be done to establish peace and tranquility in our lives. It is not unlike the mission that we have of our own faith as we look forward to a time when the lion will lie down with the lamb, when we have a world at peace. And so we gather once again for a Rosh Hashanah, wishing each other a sweet year, a year of health, a year that will bring us closer to one another. Some of us take these words seriously. Some of them say them glibly. And others of us wonder how many times we will be able to say it. And if you think you're going to get away with this service without more tears or more emotion, you can go home now. I have no guarantees. So what have I learned since that fateful day in August? I've learned to say thank you. I've learned to say I'm sorry. I've learned to give forgiveness. I've learned to say thank you. Experience is that thing in our lives which we need before we need it and only learn afterwards when we haven't needed it. And so after my experience with this, I say, learn these things. Learn to say thank you. And so it is that I will begin some thank yous, and especially I'd like to thank Rabbi Stagman for joining with us, whose own friendship and life with the Jewish community and with Cantor Kunitz has led her to our community. We all express our appreciation for your presence here, Linda. Your scholarship and your devotion to us for these holidays is very much appreciated. And the fact that you represent the pursuit of faith and knowledge and knowing that it is available to all of us at any stage of our lives is a model which we can all aspire to. You are our model and our challenge. And I can learn to say thank you to the officers and the trustees and the committee members and the task acceptors and the supporters of Temple B'nai Shalom that make all of this possible. I'm aware that for all of you, the business of the Jewish community of Huntsville is an amateur occupation in its finest sense of the word. Amateur because it comes from the heart. It is something that you love. It is your avocation. And truly, for you, the rewards of this kind of service are not among those that are measured in this world. We read from our prayer book that there were many things that were given to us that became a treasure laid up for us in the world to come. To go to be part of the community, to attend weddings, to attend the house of learning. But Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, but the study of Torah is what leads to them all. These are the virtues which lead us to Torah. Torah, Avodah, and Gemilut Chasadim. So too they are the qualities of living that give the days of our lives the value that we cherish. And so if you have been among those officers and trustees and committee members and task acceptors and supporters of our congregation, you have become a model to each other, and you have become the challenge to each other so that it might continue. You know, of course, if you have known me at all, to have lived a personal life that delights in puncturing pomposity. If I can say something nasty to someone who thinks a lot of themselves, I'm the first online to do it. I am angry with those who ignore the selfish because such postures undo the work of our faith. To some, I might appear profane, and that's when I take my greatest delight. So to any that I might have offended in this season of repentance, let me say that I am sorry for having offended, but that I too stand as a model and challenge to each one of you. It is ironic about the things that come out of my mouth. And I said to one of my friends in a moment of deep philosophical thought, remember all those lies I've taught you? All these lies I've been teaching all these years? Turns out they're true. So let me share with you that I am very aware of the gravity of my personal situation and the effect that it can have on our congregation and our community. It is hard to say the words glioma, blastoma, multiforme and not be weighed down. The only good thing about it is that Ted Kennedy got it before I did, and I know he's got rich enough to have everybody in the world working on a cure. If they get there before he does, that's great. So I share this burden when it came to me immediately because it affects our entire community. In that second week in August, just before I was to be operated on, I called your past presidents together in a hospital room on August 10th. I sat them down so that each could have the same information at the same time. And now you know and I know that my lack of health will prevent me from continuing for what has arguably been for me the most enjoyable part of my career and my active role as your rabbi. Many of you will regret this abrupt change in our relationship, but all of us can welcome this time as a time of opportunity and of evaluation, sharing and rededication to the ideals that have kept Temple B'nai Shalom as an active congregation alive and vibrant over the course of 130 years. This transition is being accompanied by clear definitions, I hope, specific responsibilities, and shaped with people who are not anxious about their burden, but zealous in defining our responsibilities and sharing it with everyone in our community. What it has produced for me is the opportunities to say, ooh, I don't even like to say this. I loved you. I don't do that well. That I love many of you. I've tolerated others of you. But at all times, I have tried to devote myself to the proper curatorship of the Jewish community. Some of you might recall in the very first sermons that I delivered, in the shock and awe of the days after 9/11, I came to say that I only hoped that I could deliver the congregation to another spiritual leader as I completed my curatorship of a magnificent legacy that deserved to be treasured and supported. It is those ancient times of over a century ago that become our model and our challenge. At the heart of everything I have done, I have tried to bring a sense of the importance of Torah. Talmud Torah keneged kulam, that the study of Torah really is equal to all of the mitzvot that we talk about. All of these things that you are encouraged to do. Why? Because Talmud Torah leads to them all. However, I have never meant the Torah as stored in an ark. I have never meant the inert pieces of parchment that are sewn together by somebody in a back room in Brooklyn. I have never meant those pieces of ink laid out across the desiccated parchment. What I have insisted upon through the many words that I have spoken is that the life we live would change because we have studied Torah. Because in the words that we have preserved as Torah, we have been instructed to choose the sacred path. Some call this halacha, the path, the way to go. Others call this the mission of tikkun olam, the repair of the world. Others simply call this the purpose of our faith. We have watched the story of our people unfold in a way that often confuses, because it is never without pointing out the problems of reality. If I have punctured the pompous, think of what the Torah reading today has done. We talk about a family that wants to commit murder, that wants to run away from towns like Sodom and Gomorrah. We want to talk about ladies that go to the temple whose lips are moving, and they have a priest that is so sensitive they say to the lady, you know what, I think you're drunk. We have a husband who can't listen to his wife. This never happens in our congregation. But Elkanah says to Hannah, I see you're so sorry. I see you're so sad. I see you're so downcast. I see that you're upset. What does he come in? He says, don't worry about it. I'm as good as 10 sons. Oh, this is sympathy. This is empathy. This is the hearing ear. Not. But the Torah and the stories that we go with bring us that sense of reality, because we have to overcome those handicaps. We have to overcome those that cannot see, merahok, hamakom merahok, the place from afar where Abraham took his son. We have to tishma. We have to ask you to listen to the people that are around you, so that the basic emotions, the basic sentiments, the sharing that comes with being a family and a community is achieved. We have watched the story of our people unfold continually into a challenge because it just does not cover itself with platitudes. I can't stand the platitudinous answers that say, oh, let's just be nice and get along. Why can't we just get along? Doesn't quite cut it.
We have watched the story of our people unfold in a way that offers itself to ever-evolving answers that are tested in the daily trials of real life. Our Torah portion of this morning proves the complications of lives truly lived. Can it be any different than we who have to live through a presidential election, the likes of which we have never seen before in our adult lives? Can we imagine what it is to relive those same strange sentiments that Grandpa and Grandma had as we watched our treasure and our fortune saved over a lifetime get washed down a drain in one day when over $1 trillion of wealth is wiped out of our pockets? That anybody who is 60 years and older has worked for a lifetime to achieve a little bit of a pension that'll give you $50, $60, $100,000 a year when you retire, and know that that's wiped away in a moment because these people have not accepted the challenges of reality and want to stuff their own pockets with their own ego? Unlike ancient faith systems that lacked this ability to face that reality, we discovered that life and circumstance are never susceptible to one answer or one solution. Have you ever seen a bumper sticker on the back of a convinced person in the world who no longer wants to think and says, so-and-so is the answer, that this is the answer? How absurd. We don't even know what the question is. We have discovered that life and circumstance are never susceptible to one answer or one solution. And that is why the principles of our faith, of Reform Judaism in particular, will be part of the Jewish reality as long as there are Jews. We are not the children of answers. We are the children of questions. We are the seekers. We are the God wrestlers. You will read in the bulletin or shortly that I write an essay that says that when I came home from school, the question was not what did you learn today, but did you find a good question to ask today? The forms may change, but the challenge remains, and the model of our behavior is to ask the right questions. At the beginning of this holiday, just a few moments ago, and again at the end, we will hear the words of the seminal prayer, the poem of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, called the Antana Tokef. It is a recital of commonplace mortal perils of the year to come. It says something in the prayer book about the Rabbi of Mayence. Well, I had a chance to visit the cathedral in Mainz, and I had a chance to study with real scholars. And the truth of that particular story is subject to some speculation. But so what? Think of the challenge and think of the model that it proposes for us. What are the things that we are to think of when we think of the passing of another year? Are we to imitate the public posture of Janus when the year in January turns and we remember that Janus is represented by a two-faced mask, the avowed purpose which is at the moment of the changing of the year is to look back and forward in a moment of oblivion, and that's the source of getting drunk at midnight on New Year's? Is this the way that we celebrate our New Year's? No, we ask forgiveness for anything that has happened between me and you. We turn to our God and ask forgiveness for those things which may have offended the Eternal. How many shall pass away, we ask, and how many shall yet be born? Who shall live? And the reality, who shall die? Who shall be at peace, and who shall be pursued? And I have, as I come closer to the idea of death, I know that I can no longer have to worry about being pursued. It's not an issue any longer. I can live at peace knowing that that's okay. Who shall be exalted, and who shall be brought low? We bring ourselves low when we no longer can anticipate how we want to live, when we no longer can make any affirmations. And we exalt ourselves by admitting our frailties. I was somewhat embarrassed by the Friday edition of the newspaper that talked about prayer and love. But you know, all of those lies that I told that reporter, they're true. They're true. And I have learned that not only do we have to give our favors to our friends and those we love, one of the things that we have to do is be able to accept that love back. And that's what you have taught me even in the last 6 to 8 weeks. There's been so much of an affirmation of what I have tried to do, or what, at least what I stand for in your minds. It's a wonderful experience to know that I have come to a place in my life where I can say thank you. Thank you for sharing your affection. Thank you for supporting a community. Thank you for making a building into a living and worshiping congregation. There is a program on NPR that is, I'm not sure whether it's carried locally, but I get it on my XM radio. There's so many different opportunities for communication that nobody can talk to one another anymore. Krista Tippett, who is incidentally a graduate of my alma mater, Brown University, is the hostess of a program called Speaking of Faith. And she offers this observation. She says, our secular culture, which is just human nature magnified, denies frailty and finitude with a million devices. This religious ritual, talking of the Yuntana Tokef, more realistically stares them in the face and asks us to make sense of our lives, and because of them, make sense of our world. Our ritual prayers and texts evoke so much that I love about the Jewish tradition that it becomes almost impossible to put them into a form that I can communicate in a short time. But consider this fact, that it is supremely attuned to human nature's messiness as well as its nobility. That we can talk and pray together and understand and know that there shall be life, that there shall be death, there shall be rich, there shall be poor, and put that together as one package and understand that it is all part of our world, we are so much better off. I've often referred to parts of our lives as the moist parts, losing $75,000 in one weekend and out of control. That's not so good. Of getting angry with your spouse, your living mate, your significant others. Of tearing down your child's ego just because you're tired. All of these things are parts of our own weakness. These are the shadow parts of our lives. It is our weakness at these times that where we turn a phrase like living like there's no tomorrow into a cliche and an excuse for froth and license. And so by the calendar, cyclically, Jews, both secular and devout, are stopped in their tracks by the long blasts of the shofar and high holy day rituals that cleanse, humble, deepen, anchor, and refresh. In long hours of prayer, liturgy, family reunions, and fasting, worshipers name and reckon with the transgression and omissions of the years past, both on an individual and communal level, and we try to wipe the slate clean for the recreation of their spiritual lives. I could never make the claim, as some faith stories do, that our beginning or our middle or our end is certain or without blemish or fated. On the contrary, if you've been listening, you know that it is only in the dark places, in the shadows, and in the testing that we discover our true selves. In this testing will be our success or our failure, our demise or the bright promise of renaissance. We have a choice in the life of our congregation to make the building a barren museum for a synagogue, or a place for the recreation of the energies of the past so that a future can radiate into holy blossoms. The prophets call this the Pirkei Kadosh, envisioned by our ancestors as the holy blossoms that left behind the sterility of what was the Garden of Eden. Think for a moment of the despair from which we have emerged in the last century, where in my lifetime at least I have lived among those who have endured the darkened ashes of martyrs. And think of the progress made because of that challenge and that model. Think of the pride with which I watch my own son redeem that memory in his generation by bringing those ashes back to this country to be used as the base of a permanent marble memorial to the martyrs of a different age. And the pledge that he made on behalf of his generation in the construct of that memorial that his generation would never forget. The initiatives of this younger generation are the platform for our next century, and upon whose shoulders 20 years from now the President of the Union for Reform Judaism will stand when this congregation meets in solemn assembly to celebrate its 150th anniversary with the next President of the Union for Reform Judaism. So too I would say to you on Rosh Hashanah, at this celebration of a new year, that we not forget the 60th anniversary of the founding of the State of Israel. 60 years ago, where there was only a dream of a Jewish state carved out of a Zionism that was as visionary as Theodor Herzl could create in 1898. And think, too, of the many trials the state has had to face in order to survive and even prosper in the ideologies of its own citizens. Think of the pride that I had when I said I was going to Jerusalem to be with my daughter who was living in that sacred city. And we have more than several sets of parents in our congregation that savor that special satisfaction of knowing that their children have made an affirmation about the state of Israel. This pattern of idealism and trial is not something that is new to any one of us. Indeed, the entire teaching of the Torah for Rosh Hashanah is based on this tension. Every year I have read Torah for the Rosh Hashanah, I have been confronted, engaged, and challenged by the story of the binding of Isaac. And when I read the text, it changes before me like a kaleidoscope. When I was a young man, I identified with Isaac. When I was in the military service, I identified with a country at war, committing their youngsters to the possibility of death. And as an older citizen, I see what we have to do to our children to secure our future, to teach them the lessons of how to survive in the next generation. And this year, even before life changed, I decided to ask myself, why for about 30 years have I ignored the fact that there is a second reading in our book, and a reading that as an alternative to the binding of Isaac? The narrative is the story of creation, the sanguine existence in this pleasant Garden of Eden. Why have I rejected that for so many years? My suggestion to you is that the creators of the prayer book thought, when it was formed and being written, that the holiday of Rosh Hashanah represented the birthday of the world. It was the time of creation for the world, and thus an appropriate time to read the creation story. But I suggest to you that Gan Eden has been ignored by me, at least, and by many others, because the time of creation has passed. It was yesterday. The time of the Garden of Eden is no longer possible. It may have been better. It was a time of no sermons. It was a time of no reflection. It was a time of no awareness of the actual challenge that comes with a life that's married to sober thought. It was a time when you didn't have to sweat, which means you didn't have to work, which means you didn't have any progress. Not unlike many people whose politics are based on trying to get the American public to recreate an age of innocence which never really existed, some rabbis wanted worshipers to think of life as being as innocent as the Garden of Eden would have been were it sustainable. Some religions hypothecate what it is to lie on the bosom of the Lamb, or what it is to be in heaven, or to be in rapture. But that is not the faith of Judaism. The faith of Judaism takes us to the possibility of the destruction of the world at the time of Noah. It takes us to the possibility of gossip and maliciousness at the building of a ziggurat at the Tower of Babel. It takes us to the possibility that we will kill our sons because of some strange notion of what it is to be faithful to a God that may or may not exist in our mind. The Jewish religion takes us to the possibility of destruction and gossip when it tears down tall buildings, and we don't even have to remind ourselves any longer of that possibility in our real lives, as we know that the Tower of Babel in the last decade was brought down in the midst of New York City. Filling the streets with rubble, filling the streets with people that we love, and the illusion that all of life would be better if we just keep our hands off of the situation. Our faith talks about the interruption of families because of infidelities, because of ruses, because of tricky inheritances, because the nature of our family life is not pure and is not simple. That is not only our model, but it is also our critical challenge that we meet and become aware of that. Our faith talks about the destruction of cities because people are gossips and sneaks, as they were in Sodom and Gomorrah. Our faith talks about the challenges between generations when it asks us to consider the challenges that existed between Abraham and Isaac. And after it is all told, we read our story, we do something that you may not be aware of. We read about the pursuit of reconciliation. And we know that Isaac returns to his family. The story of Judaism is told in the trials that it endures. The strength of our people resides in facing the challenge that comes after the innocence of being a child is lost and is replaced with mature thought, determined effort, and a reality based on the experience of the real world. There was a reason why the cherubs stood at the entrance to the Garden of Eden with flaming swords in their hand. The rabbis said that this was to prevent us from going back to an ideal place, an idealized place of no action and no sweat. The rabbis wanted us to know that life is here today with the challenges of markets and faulty congressmen and illegal bribes and all of the machinations of what it is to live in the real world. With us, diseases and brain tumors exist. With us, love and devotion exist. In real life, with its gift of life and its certain challenge of death, we gather as a community once again to say that we praise the God for the miracle of life and all of the challenges which await us. So for the substance that is given us from that divine hand, and for the privilege of being witness even for our brief life on earth, to the miracle of the Jewish people, I ask you to say with me, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, shehechiyanu, v'kiyamanu, v'higiyanu, lazman hazeh.